there was 2 days of conference, but the day before that was a intergovernment meeting where, and I would have thought, that this happens all the time, but apparently it doesn't. Is that high levels of politicians and public servants met with CEOs of the big mining companies. They don't come any bigger than BHP and Rio, as we know, but they're putting them all in the same room. I mean, I heard from both sides, politicians and the corporates, who said it was the most refreshing thing they've ever done, because they've never actually sat down and put their cards on the table and say, listen, we can't deliver the copper. And so, why can't you? Isn't it? Don't you guys just dig a hole and it comes out and it ends up there? And no, we've got to go out and find. We've got to get on the ground and find it. Then we've got to work out if it's profitable to dig up, and then we've got to dig it up, then treat it, and then deliver it. And it's a multi-stage thing. And you could see sort of a few light bulbs coming off in the political side.
Richard Morrow is a stockbroker, fund manager, and the chair of the Melbourne Mining Club, a fantastic not-for-profit organization that offers a networking forum where the biggest names in the industry meet. I noticed that he was lucky enough to attend the recent Future Minerals conference in Saudi, where he was rubbing shoulders with mining execs of some of the world's largest companies. So I thought, what a better person to talk to get a download of the takeaways from this event, plus a front seat to Richard's finger on the mining industry pulse in general. We cover quite a few angles in this chat, the growth of mineral exploration in the Middle East, the location being an ideal staging post for exploration in Asia and Africa, and for commons and capital with its proximity to Europe. And he runs me through some of his key takeaways from the event, including the importance of the interaction of policymaker delegates from the various countries with upper management of the larger companies that attended the conference. He also touches on the importance of the robustness of the junior exploration industry and how much pain has been felt in the copper market. And because you all know I love my crystal ball gazing so much, I did get a download from Richard on what the vibe on the floor was and how he projects his own forecast onto that. So this got us to briefly discuss what time it is on the good old lion clock and the available cash and opportunities in the market and what good things we should do with that. I really enjoyed catching up with Richard, and I hope that there's something useful in it for you too. Enjoy. Hey Richard, how's it going?
Very good, thanks Rene, very good.
How's the jet lag? Did you only got back from the Middle East, didn't you?
Yeah, got back on Monday morning, and it took a few days. And just last night, everything seemed to come together, and there's nothing worse, isn't it? That foggy feeling in your head. I only had that sort of 3 or 4 days out of a week,
Yeah, oh, that's good, because flying east is not nice, I think. So you're done well then, looking pretty fresh. So that's good. But I was pretty busy. I mean, I had severe FOMO really. I was sort of seemed to be such a great show and so many interesting talks there. I saw you on stage there as well, hosting a talk. So there's a couple of things I wanted to talk to you about. What your takeaways out of that was, because there's a lot going on. Good show.
Yeah, the Future Minerals Forum, it was the second year that they put it together. There was a big focus on batteries, battery metals, and of course copper was front and centre. It was quite an interesting one. There were 12,000 attendees,
wow.
200 companies. Including, and some great presenters, some people you really don't get to see speaking in that sort of environment, like say the MD of BHP, Mike Henry, the chairman of Rio Tinto, was Dominic, his name I've just forgotten there for the moment, but Dominic Barton, of course.
Yeah.
And and then there was Jeremy Weir, the head of Trafigura, and just some people that are very, very highly placed. And the other refreshing thing is, being out of their home territory, if you like, they seem to be more inclined to talk freely about things. And one of the big things coming out was how much pain's being felt in the copper market by the traders and also the producer in BHPs and Rios, in that they feel that these great prices out there, but we can't meet the demand, which the market person and me suggests the price got to go up, but I think that's the same sort of thought that's occurring to them, and they'd like to be capturing a bit of that for their own P&L and their own business.
Sure, sure. Well, I find it really interesting because I think we looked at the event last year, and this year it seemed to indeed be all the top players, everybody, consulting group, service providers, contingents from all these countries, big companies, small companies. How did they pull this off? How did they just, there's obviously a fair bit to invest in the Middle East seems to be having quite an aggressive strategy when it comes getting in a mineral space. How did everybody end up there so quickly?
Yeah, the Saudis, I think it's an intergenerational thing. The new generation of leadership's taken on there, and they realise that the oil's not going to be around forever. It's a finite resource, so we should be investing more in the in the future industries. There's 35 million people as a population of Saudi, and they really in order for socio-political reasons, it'd be a good idea to set up industries to employ a lot more of those. They certainly they're talking the talk, but they're also walking the walk in providing educational positions for many of these younger generations, these younger people, so they can step into these roles. But they've taken the sensible view that they don't need to do it on their own. Let's invest a bit of money in bringing big industry players to a conference, putting them up in the middle of the capital city of Riyadh, and getting them to get there and talk. And I think that also appealed to a lot of the speakers, because a lot of these conferences you go to a bit of an echo chamber, but
exactly.
being off your own home turf, and then having a host who desperately keen to hear from you, and there's business opportunity there too.
Absolutely.
And I think also there's another thing is you see the Emirates, say Dubai and Abu Dhabi and Qatar, and you look across there, and the sort of way they parlayed their energy wealth, if you like, into new industries, and in particular property development based around these mega airports. And then when you start to think about it, that part of the world is an ideal staging post to break up the journey between the old centres of commerce and capital in Europe and the UK, and the new thriving business communities of the world in Asia, in China for one, India for two, and then the rest of the Asian tigers. And you'd probably throw Australia in there and New Zealand as well. It's a staging post in between where there's a lot of money, and then where money is required, or where there's a lot of growth that would attract that sort of capital. And then you throw in there, there's one additional thing is, the fastest growing population on the planet is in Africa. But do you really want to base yourself there? For not every country there is rates high on the political risk level. So what the Saudis are making a case for: hey, come over here, base yourself in somewhere in Saudi Arabia, do some exploration here while you're here, if you've got a reason to come here, or just use our communities, communications, and our infrastructure to then launch over into these very highly prospective but maybe politically risky places in Africa where big companies got to go if you want to chase an elephant, if you like.
And are you, so when you're connecting them with people from Australia at that conference, or others from across the ditch, do you feel that strategy is getting traction? Is that, that's their strategy, and are people still sort of eyeballing that? Like, or I saw a couple of consulting companies suddenly setting up some sort of hub there or an office, and a couple of deals obviously made there that were quite high profile. The Friedland deal was all over the internet, and I'm sure the timing of that was all very carefully orchestrated, and it all adds to that bit of a shift in gravity. I mean, that could we look at like a real mining center in the next sort of 10 to 15 years, mining exploration center that indeed is centered there, because far easier to cater for indeed exploration and discovery in Africa from the Middle East than it is perhaps from Africa, from Australia. Did you get that feeling of support from the juniors that were there, or some of the service companies that you may have talked to there? Or?
Yeah, I think all the service companies there feel that the Saudi would make an ideal place to base a team, and also make a contribution back into the Saudi economy and Saudi community as well in helping to mentor and educate the next generation of mining engineers, geologists, geoscientists. And plus the geology there is quite interesting. I mean, you're probably more on top of that than I am, but that Nubian Shield was something that, and it's you go, you can, that's the place to go chasing elephants over there. It's been aggressively explored for hydrocarbons, but the rest of it is there's been just lightly brushed over, and a potential there for some tier one copper and gold.
Yeah. So you run the Melbourne Mining Club, and I was just going to ask you to sort of maybe put a bit of background into that. But was that the capacity in which you're there visiting, or what capacity were you there? Because you also work as a broker, and were you there just out of a general interest?
Yeah, definitely there wearing the Melbourne Mining Club hat. It goes back to the relationship with there was a external organizer of the Future Minerals Conference, and they're the same guys who put together IMARC in Australia.
Right,
of course. Because the Melbourne Mining Club has been a big supporter of IMARC since its inception, and it moved to Sydney last year. But we still have very close links, and the Saudis had a big presence in IMARC over the years, and but they needed just some external people to come and are used to running and hosting these sort of panel discussions. Right. And you saw it. I mean, there's some big egos and big ideas that need to be condensed into manageable sort of 10 minutes or half an hour, and that's what we were required to be to come over and do it, and delighted to. It's just I mean, the ethos of the mining club is to really sponsor forums and conversations about the mining industry, and because we can all learn from each other, and that was definitely the way that we were approached being over there, and delighted to help, and delighted to be involved. I mean, and you could see the people coming from all parts of the world to be there, and it was the ideal forum was able to. We learned a lot. I mean, hopefully we gave a lot of assistance to it.
So obviously there's all the talk about there, the critical minerals and so on, and what's hot at the moment in the copper story. But any revelations coming out of there, or whether it's, not a detailed summary with bullet points, I'm sure, but what's the sort of main takeaways that you walked away with, coming out of that conference, both from a buoyancy perspective, because my read of the crystal ball is, and one of the reasons I was keen to chat to you, because it struck me you're so well entrenched with obviously the Melbourne Mining Club, but generally the industry at large. Who better to talk to, get a bit of a barometer check than yourself. So you went there obviously with a good understanding of what's going on. Did that shift your ground at all, or are we moving? Did that move more towards positivism because the the industry, as far as I'm concerned, is going to do some pretty big things this year, and it's a good start this week with the gold and the copper. So far so good. How did you walk away from that? Like more positive, or some more risk, or some particular challenges that you hadn't quite considered, or new avenues that we need to focus on, those kind of things?
Well, I was always quite bullish about copper in terms of price, and certainly came away even more bullish and convinced from that. And we've all read the arguments, decarbonisation, and demand from EVs and motors and things like that,
Yeah.
and transmission. And but there it was put up. I mean, it was almost painful the way some of these executives are talking about. There's this. This is what we've got to do. Our remit is to discover and develop copper projects and supply into the market, but we're not going to be able to do it. And one of the key things there, and one of the big problems, is basically the whole permitting process. And Mike Henry expressed it very well, saying that the lead time now from discovery to first metal production in a copper project of size is approaching 20 years.
Yeah.
And so. And the frustrating thing for them is, even if we found something today and we started today, it's not going to be much use to this big decarbonisation demand pull factor that's it's got a couple of big immediate hurdles there, or timelines in the 2030 decarbonisation and the 2050 net zero. So maybe we'll get to contributing to the net zero, but that was probably the biggest thing. And then the next thing was lithium, and then the other battery metals behind that. And there just is an enormous focus on discovery and development, and then the processing of the various forms of lithium that are required by the battery industries around the world. So we've got that, but then out of Europe, there's a lot of Europeans there, and especially a lot of government battery industry experts, and people like the recycling industries there, who also were in town and contributing into the discussion. And what became clear is the amount of money, research money, and talent that's being pushed at how do we find ways of replacing this high cost input of lithium to in the future, to make batteries more cheaper and more available to the industries that are going to use it. And then there's the two camps of batteries for transport and equipment, and then there's stationary batteries where you're more heading towards those vanadium flow type and different technologies that big bulky things that sit on the ground, and how to best do it. And that's what really jumped off the page at me, is the extreme commitment especially from the Europeans, who are probably far ahead thinking than where we're at.
And sorry to just interrupt there, because I covered that Europe strategy a little bit in some other talks that I've had recently, and that's interesting to hear you say that, because I think indeed that's where it's sort of brewing from, or where the fire is hottest, I guess, for this change. But you just mentioned this echo chamber, right? And
yes.
So you're sitting all there in that room, but it sounds like. And if we're talking about permitting issues, because I can see that being an issue, and obviously ESG is the classic other problem that everybody, and kind of the same thing in a way. were there any politicians and decision makers and policy makers involved with this conference, or was it in itself an echo chamber? Because we know all these issues, quote unquote, we know, or we think we know, or at least we talk about it a lot, so that we are all making each other very worried and excited at the same time about the opportunities. But ultimately, particularly in Europe, I mean, it's great that they're talking about it, but there's not particularly mining background. And as I said a few times on the channel before, a lot of my oil and gas friends are now all coming, they're all having new titles and energy transition champions and whatnot, and that's all great. But at the end of the day, the politicians need to hear their story as well. Were they involved at all?
Yeah, well, you hit the nail on the head. There was 2 days of conference, but the day before that was a intergovernment meeting where, and I would have thought, that this happens all the time, but apparently it doesn't. Is that high levels of politicians and public servants met with CEOs of the big mining companies. They don't come any bigger than BHP and Rio, as we know.
Exactly.
But they're putting them all in the same room. I mean, I heard from both sides, politicians and the corporates, who said it was the most refreshing thing they've ever done, because they've never actually sat down and put their cards on the table and say, listen, we can't deliver the copper.
Yeah.
So why can't you do this? And don't you guys just dig a hole and it comes out and it ends up there? And no, we've got to go out and find. We've got to get on the ground and find it.
Yeah.
Then we've got to work out if it's profitable to dig up, and then we've got to dig it up, then treat it, and then deliver it. And it's a multi-stage thing. And you could see sort of a few light bulbs coming off in the political side. And without rocks being thrown at each other, they were able to say, listen, look, the whole permitting thing, 20 years, it's too long. We've got to work out a way of, we want to make sure that the projects that we're putting together are going to be have the highest possible environmental standards, but we've got to work out a way of getting there quicker. And maybe we need to focus on certain areas. I couldn't work out where that was actually going, but as in the part of the permitting, the parts of the permitting system that are really important, and the other bullshit, which is taking up all the time. So maybe I think it's good that they start that discussion. I mean, and
it's interesting because go on.
Yeah, and there was one other important part of that is that, look, the mining companies are saying to the governments, look, we know how it's easy votes for you guys, and you've got to face the people 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. It's really easy to, kick the mining industry. There's probably votes in it. You'll get, votes from 20% of the population. But can you resist the urge to boot us? And then can you also resist the urge to stick the boot in even harder when we have a problem? Can you come and try and fix the problem with us and help us, rather than, sitting back there and generating, votes by sticking the boot into us. And
I'm not a politician, and don't want to dive into New Zealand politics either. But the little I know of it, obviously, is that they're not elected for a very long period, and the stuff that we're talking about is really, it's gonna take us a couple of decades at least to make inroads in this problem piece, right? So, and it's very difficult to put it all on a piece of paper. I mean, there is a supply and demand thing that you can clearly identify, but I can imagine that as a politician, that 15-year plan is not something that's going to win your votes. And then you get things like, what perhaps you heard of is the policy of no new mines on conservation land in New Zealand. That sentence was just uttered in the first year that a certain party took office, and then the industry goes, well, what does that mean? And that's all great, but we still have roads to build and houses to build for all these people coming into the country, and so on and so on. So it's so it's good to hear that.
Data, Rene, over here in Oz, the capital expenditure data, it's flatlining. There's just nothing happening because the boards need certainty, and that's one thing they're also screaming out for is from the politicians is, look, please, we need certainty. If we're going to be investing billions and billions of dollars of shareholder money, other people's money, we need more certainty, and it's showing up in the data. Is that mines are getting older, reserves are being depleted, we're not keeping pace with demand, and so because the investments mainly only just really stay in business capex rather than expansion capex.
Yeah. No, that makes sense, and I don't want to turn it to too much doom and gloom because, like I said, we've had this, the topic is obviously a very current one, so we can't help but going in that direction and trying to work out where to go with it. But
well, I think it's interesting if you've got an existing project that's got multi-year life in it, you're okay. In fact, things are going brilliantly. If you're an explorer, there's probably limitless funding for a good exploration idea in that base metals and gold sort of space, but it's in the middle where the development capital's just not there unless you're in something uber sexy like lithium or graphite that go in that battery metals situation.
Well, I was going to talk to you about that because obviously, so you were there with your Melbourne Mining hat on, but you do work as well. And correct me if I'm wrong, as either an analyst or a broker. You have that experience. What's your current read on the temperature of the IPO market? Because we're all cooling down towards the back end of last year. Is the only thing coming off the ground is that sort of the rare earths and the lithiums? I'm talking Australia now particularly. But if you have a sort of global view, I'd like to hear it as well. But have you already seen some seedlings at the start of the year, particularly with the prices doing well, that might kick some new life in it? So what's your prediction there?
Well, I sit as both a broker and as a fund manager. So there's no end yet to the lithium sort of interest that's out there. In fact, there's probably limitless funding for a good IPO, backing a good exploration team, and I'm seeing still that there are a significant number of those companies still being formed and those proposals getting accepted by not just the professionals but also by the man in the street, smaller retail investors. So there's a lot of interest in that space. Gold is still attracting money, but I think the market is looking for the fruits of that labour, if you like. And in the next couple of weeks, we'll see the profit and loss accounts from the mining companies come out. And like yesterday, we had Pilbara, $12 billion company, and they're speaking at the Melbourne Mining Club next month. Announced sort of record, almost obscene amounts of revenue from being one of the only lithium producers and treatment companies in Australia. Selling into the Chinese more advanced, more downstream battery type metal industries over there. So yes, there's a significant. I mean, it is. There's a note of caution out there. That what the share market's like. I mean, it's either madly running in this direction or madly running in that direction. And last year, madly running in raising new capital, etc. And it probably tapped the market too hard as we got towards the end of the year. Market sort of bottomed around about November. But you can't keep good man down, and you know how enthusiastic people are in our end of the world, both the fundraising and the miners and explorers themselves. So there's no shortage of new ideas there that's happening. So it's very very buoyant, not super buoyant, but I think we'll get that way if these high prices keep up there, and if these and it shows through in the profit and loss accounts that we'll see next month in our market and all around the world for that matter. So if investors can see through the whole process from putting money into exploration, having it processed, and then there's a profit at the end of it and a dividend or something like that, then they'll go, yeah, well we better keep heading down that road, and then the next sort of money will rush in the same direction all at once.
And there is nothing fundamental that needs to change to this. The whole cycle of investment, exploration companies, big players, small players. Should we advocate for any change? I mean, you can think of topics of like the big three not doing enough to explore. Arguably, is there? And there's a lot of juniors, arguably, with who are still just keeping the lights on. Is there anything fundamental that we need to change, or do you just say, look, it is what it is. It's supply demand, and it's the industry we live in. The prices go up, and somebody will come around and find something. Any structural changes that you see as needing to make?
No, I think the biggest, not change, but that just having that overarching thing of a very, very strong professional body and the AusIMM does fill this role to make sure the standards of information upon which people make decisions has the best probable integrity to it, and so I think that's something that's very, very strong. And the rest, you just got to leave the market to take care of it, because it will. I mean, the solution of high prices is high prices, and more people will risk capital in exploration and development if the rewards are high enough. And they certainly are now, and they're probably going to go a bit higher in the short to medium term. One of the very interesting things, and you'll love this, is out of the Saudi conference, is that the real energy and excitement and innovation in the exploration space comes from the juniors, and that's why Saudi is also opening up large tracts of their land and allocating them out of maybe trapped in old structures to being re-offered to small explorers, because as it was remarked a number of times from a number of both the Saudi side and the internal investors, is you need to have a robust junior exploration space in there, or else you just don't get that innovation. And that's and that was really pushed hard. And actually, you can see it here. You can see it in New Zealand as well. It's the juniors that take the risks. They don't have big careers to risk. They just want to get out there and find a big deposit, just like their granddaddy did. If you like, and there's that innovation and the use of technology and more sensible ways of targeting. So you're not always leading with the drill bit. In fact, just
nice way to put it.
It is really quite a sensible approach, and it's constantly innovating too. I mean, just over in my career, the changes I've seen, all the way from stream sampling, geochem, all sorts of other. I mean, one of Rob Friedland's pushes over there was this strategy of injecting a hell of a lot of electricity into the ground and measuring what comes up, 50 kilometres away, and mapping what it probably hit on the way down, and those sort of things. He's a big talker, Mr. Friedland, but hey, if it works, his words were, copper deposits light up like Christmas trees if once these pulses hit.
Well, they got a lot of in-house technical skills, these guys. So I'm sure that if he says that, it's not just a pipe dream. And but you're not wrong. I mean, the amount of innovation isn't bad at all. We have come up with some really interesting things, and I talked about that on this channel a little bit about a number of these innovations. I mean, the argument is still that, and again, I forgot the numbers, but that we invest tens of percentage points less than we used to in R&D in Australia than we used to in 80s and 90s. So from that sense, I'm not sure if all the inventions will come from Australia, or the key ones in the next couple of decades, and that grant might be shifting. But with that innovation comes more opportunity, and that junior space needs to be strong. What I'm hoping we might achieve in the next 20 years is that the general public realizes that. Let's rephrase that. If we can change our image enough, and I think we're working on that quite well now. There's a lot of people doing some really interesting things. If we can change our image enough to actually be part of the solution rather than part of the problem, then we might also entice those retail investors and the Tesla and the Apple investors, instead of putting their money there, to put their money into these ventures, because then we can actually do some real, make some real impact. I was going to say do some real damage, but that probably wouldn't be the right phrasing. We can make a real impact on finding things, and that's I'm sensing that we're not too far off, right? There's so much communication going out these days in changing how we work as an industry towards the public, that investment might suddenly start flowing, and it might become really interesting to put money in these copper, nickel, rare earth, vanadium, as you said, lithium projects. So yeah, hopefully that's actually we're halfway through that.
Well, if you think about it, though, one of the biggest stationary pools of capital out there that you'd call intelligent capital is sitting on the balance sheets of mining companies. I mean, we talked to one chap over there. He was proudly saying to us, "I've got $400 million of cash on my balance sheet and no debt." I'm saying, really?
Yeah, what are you doing with it?
What are you doing with it? But there's so much of that out there. And you look at the albeit smallish, relatively small, mid cap company balance sheets out there. They're paid back all their debt. They're sitting there absolutely swimming with cash, and that should be where it comes from. But if you're a mining company, you've been going for 15 years, you've struggled, you went out there and you struggled to raise the money to explore, you found something, you struggled to get the money together to develop it, you pay back as greedy banks, you paid off your greedy stockbrokers and your greedy fund managers, you've given them everything, you sit back there and go, oh, yeah, oh no, I don't want to do it again.
Another argument is that you only really invest that money at the bottom of the market, obviously not at the top, right? So I'm sure a lot of people are sitting our cash waiting for things really to break apart, and then you would make some smart investments. I mean, I'm sure that Friedland didn't make his money in copper by buying at the top. So there's an argument there. But it doesn't really help us finding things when we need to, because I don't think that crash, well, I've said it a few times now and kind of committed to it, what will happen in the next few years. So it will, but yeah.
All that stagnant money sitting there, I mean, the next phase in the market should be an M&A phase.
Yes.
And there's a lot of stranded resource in Australia in particular that's just sitting there and can't move on from the feasibility stage to the development stage, and is sitting there and there's opportunities galore, but it's.
Are you saying that we need to dial back the lion clock? Because according to the lion clock, we're well past 12 o'clock now. I mean, that's the last time I saw it in December, I think. But wasn't the M&A somewhere before that? Or has it? I feel we sort of we sneakily took our finger and wound the clock back a few hours based on the last couple of months.
Look, I don't think the market is as the lion clock is as relevant as it used to be. With pardon, Eddie, to Hedley Whittup, my good friend, but I mean, the industry has sort of evolved so much, I think the amount of regulation sitting over the top of things is such that people want a high degree of certainty before they invest money that's taken them decades to accumulate on, and it's not your money, it's your shareholders' money, and so that adds an extra layer of care factor to it. So that's certainly, and I guess a lot of the entrepreneurialism has disappeared in the producers is certainly, and in fact, there's generational change going on there at the moment. But in the exploration stage, there's a hell of a lot of innovation and excitement, and
For sure.
people in their 30s and their 40s that are really at the peak of their career, and they're getting out there and doing it. And that's the other thing, is that exploration is a numbers game. I mean, the more money you throw at something, the more likelihood you have of success. And sitting here in Victoria, we've been like the last place you'd want to invest in exploration for many decades, and yet a new breed of explorer and a new generation has come up through the ranks now. And whereas a good year would see maybe 30 or 40 mil spent on exploration in Victoria on hard rock projects, this year's getting more than $200 million.
Yeah.
So the discoveries are coming through. And there's also a greater understanding of the opportunity of the geology and where we should be exploring, and also we should be using not the techniques our grandfathers used, but using these advanced systems. There was sorry to keep going back to the Future Minerals. One of the most enthralling speakers, and if you can get a hold of it, was the guy from NASA who was saying how they can sit up there and in the satellites and pick through various measures what they where they should be exploring for lookalike type blobs of discovery not that far away from existing mines. Which is what they're all saying, is that where do you find a big project? Well, it's in the shadow of the head frame of the last one. So
No, I saw there was a nice article floating around recently that said that. And I do see the various Victorian-based projects that you put in the spotlight there through your LinkedIn account, which I really appreciate. And you're quite right. There's quite a lot of new activity, and it's good to see. That's always what we need. But maybe just to link that into the Melbourne Mining Club work that you do. So there's obviously it's an industry advocacy, and you're getting some really high-profile speakers. Do you put those talks online at all? Is that happen? Yeah.
Yep. Certainly the luncheon, and look, I just correct you. We don't advocate. We just provide a forum, and
Sure.
and Melbourne's a funny place actually. Like it's very clubby. Like everyone's got their football club, their golf club, their racing club, their city club. Melburnians like to come together and share issues. Shared as a problem halved, and so. There's also this thriving mining community that's here for historical reasons dating back to the gold rushes, the 1850s, and there's this huge support network, and the Oz IMM itself is based here, and lots of legal, lots of accounting, just lots of engineering. All based here, and we provide a focal point where people can come together and hear an interesting speaker, and we generally get the CEOs or the chairman of major companies, and they've been going for 20 years, 125 lunches now, and there's very, very robust. Plus, it's a collegiate thing also.
I thought it was a great event, because I remember that's where we first met, I think, at one of the Mining Club events, and I'd never heard of it. And I was indeed in Melbourne for one of the OzMM functions, and I was really amazed by indeed the people in the room. There's so many different backgrounds, like you said, legal, accounting, but big names and so on. So it's.
And a lot of the senior executives of the industry realise that you've got to go to these things so you can learn from younger generations, and perhaps get them, talk to them, and work out which ones you should try and headhunt come and work for you in these difficult times. And So yeah, it's a very, very interesting forum. But there's mining clubs popping up all over the world now. Perth has a very robust one.
Yeah.
Sydney robust. Brisbane. Then you go over to Singapore. There's a big event slated for April in Singapore, the Singapore Mining Club there, because there's a lot of investment money sitting there that would like to get involved with projects,
Yeah.
and the stage one in that is just put them in the same room together so they can get to see each
Formula.
other.
Yeah. Add a couple of beers and yeah, the deals will get done. That's yeah. No, that's good.
You've got to have that. And that was another thing. Sorry to keep harping back to the future of minerals thing. Is short-termism. And Mark Bristow from Barrick, the CEO of Barrick, was talking. He said, "Yeah, it's the worst thing in this industry that's impacting us is the short-term thinking that too many of us have." And I'm as guilty as that. You buying and selling shares, but it takes 5 to 10 years for the full economic benefit and social benefit to make itself known in before you get on and do something and proceed with the development. And
yeah, that's true, but it must be from an investment perspective. And again, I'm not an investor, so what do I know? But if you read that you're doing better to just invest in gold itself than an actual company exploring or even mining gold, then that's pretty scary stuff. So from
I guess you match up people's investment horizons and objectives with because for some people buying a pet rock or a piece of gold does the trick, but then there's the leverage that you get from owning and profitability of a mining company going up when the gold price goes up. That adds that extra bit of risk, but also adds the extra bit of possible return. So that's certainly a driver.
That's true, but not to distract from the Melbourne Mining Club, because I did want to ask you a couple more things, because like you said, all these mining clubs are popping up and people coming together is where some of these deals get made or solutions get thought of, or we're somehow joined together to move forward. So it allows you to put a great finger on the pulse. Is that obviously you're the chair there, right? At the Mining Melbourne Club, is that right? Yeah. So how do you select these? How do you select your speakers, and what's the sort of main drive? Is it just anybody with an interesting story who has just been in the spotlight, or what's your strategy?
Well, to be honest with you, we only have 6 a year, so there's 20 or 30 large mining companies that we really want to put up there as a headline act. So it's often we get approached quite a bit, but it's a matter of making it topical, making it realistic, to get people to give up their hour of lunch or hour and a half, come on down and hear what they have to say. And and then we do put the videos of these presentations up on the website of the Mining Club, which is www.melbourneminingclub.com. That who access for free. And I've got a prop with me here. I mean, there was this book we put together here, 20 plus 20, of all the to mark our 20th anniversary. And there's some. We interviewed quite a few of our speakers over that 20-year period, and said, look, we're going to ask you what have the past 20 years been like, but what do you think about the next 20 years? And there's some fascinating stories in there, and that's also available for free off the website to be downloaded in soft copy form. So there's Robert Friedland is just incredible listening to what he has to say, and even our first patron, the late Sir Avi Parvo, his first speech back in 2001 is as relevant then as it is today. And one of the themes coming across is we don't tell our story well. We've got to explain to people to why we need mining. And so we're part of that process of trying to explain that, but to give a forum to a global or local industry leader and then tell us what you think we
Yeah.
need to know. And generally, they're all very, very good. I'm also about put up positive role models for especially for women in mining. Last year, we had of the 6 speakers, 3 of them were female, and I was very proud of that. And you can and it's not about tokenism and stuff like that. It's about putting up positive role models so that young women in particular sitting in the audience can go, oh, I can do that. Yes, it's tough, but I think I can do that. And that's all. It's that little germ of an idea, and suddenly we've got the other 50% of the population that may not be interested in mining can maybe spark something, and what we're trying to do is get the best of the best to come and work in the best industry in the world. And
to have that forum there and to have so much success with it, that's obviously that's all part of everybody chipping in and doing their bit to help us all moving forward. So and I can't wait to come back to one. I was in Melbourne only a couple of days ago, but it was just in and out. I'll put a link in the description here for people who are interested, and look forward to catching up in the real next time around. And any topics then, just to come maybe as a last point, any topics you said, how you approach the Melbourne Mining Club and the topics there, but what should we be discussing here? What's the key thing? Obviously, you said we need to be better at selling our story. Is that what it is for you? Is that the prime focus as an industry that you suggest we focus on?
Well, look, to be fair, I think it is a bit of an echo chamber. What we need to be doing is just sharing with each other what we're doing to advance the industry. One of the big things there is education, and I think you've probably seen this, that there's been a tragic drop off in students studying for earth sciences, and what we need to do is build that back up again and encourage our universities to maintain those strong geology and earth science departments, so we can continue to have the next generation come through, because it's tragic how the numbers have fallen away, and how some universities have let things slide in terms of faculties. We need to be, if we want to get better at exploiting the Earth's resources in an ethical way, we've got to have the best people involved in the process, and that's a major focus for us. It's part of telling our story, that's front and center.
Yeah, well, look, that's interesting, because literally everybody I speak to says pretty much the same thing. So it's a sign that almost doesn't need further enhancing. But whoever I talk to in whatever corner of the world, whatever position or level or background, technical, non-technical, finance, they are all saying the same thing. So this is real, and we covered that. We gave that a fair bit of time on the channel. And the solutions are beyond us all, but the dialogue and looking for that dialogue and being inclusive there is part of the way out. So appreciate that thought. And any final thoughts, things that you wanted to share that we haven't quite covered, or?
Well, I think we just this is. What we're doing today is part of trying to tell our story to the world, and I think we've just got to just keep doing it and being out there. And I think that's as far as we can take it.
Yeah. Now, I'd love to get 4 million views on these videos so that we can have the outreach that we deserve. But unless I turn into a TikTok video and put a pink hat on and whatever else I need to do to get those views, I think that's just...
Whatever it takes, Rene, I think you should take one for the team.
Maybe. Well, we'll talk to the social media team and see what we can do here. But you're giving me a few ideas. Look, Richard, great to catch up with you. As per usual, thanks so much for your thoughts, and I look forward to catching up in Melbourne.
Looking forward to catching up with you then, Rene. Good on you. Thank you.
Thanks for chatting, man. See you later.